Hi again, my name is Lisa Dregney, Long-Term Care Planning and Insurance Advisor with Yorkshire Insurance Advisors, welcoming you to an important video addressing the top 5 excuses I hear in my practice for why clients feel they don't need to plan for long-term care. It's really important to address these up front, since if you're thinking any of them apply to you, you're not likely to take the information I provide to heart, since you'll just assume this planning doesn't apply to you, right? Before I get started, take a minute and write down any reasons you feel long-term care planning may not be for you. All right, let's get started. Excuse number 1. Long-term care is only provided at the typical nursing home of 30 years ago. I'm never going to a place like that. Many of us have an image of what a long-term care facility looks like from the nursing home we visited our parents or our grandparents at many years ago. That was typically very cold, somber, sterile, and had multiple residents in a very small room. What do you visualize when you hear the term long-term care facility? I'll never forget the image I carried with me until I started in this business, and I got to see firsthand how the industry has changed. One of the biggest changes, as mentioned in the previous video, is that 80% of long-term care is provided at home, where most of us want to be cared for. However, if you happen to need more care that can be provided at home safely, affordably, and without isolation, know that the majority of facilities today are not likely to be what you remember them as being. Another comforting fact may be that the average nursing home stay is less than 1 year at end of life. Prior to that, most care can be provided at home or in an independent or assisted living facility that are focused on your overall well-being. If you wrote down this as one of your excuses for not wanting to plan, I challenge you to visit a few facilities in your area and you'll see what I'm talking about firsthand. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Excuse number 2, and probably the most common. I'll just go into the woods and shoot myself if I ever need care. Problem solved. I hear this one frequently from my male clients especially, whether it's this exact phrase or another similar one. I can appreciate this plan to a certain extent since it tells me that they love their spouse or family enough to think of them or think of a long-term care plan that doesn't burden them with their caregiving. But of course, this is not a viable plan for obvious reasons and therefore is no plan at all. Nobody wants to think about a time when he or she needs someone to help get dressed in the morning or get on and off the toilet multiple times a day. But if you don't plan for it and your day comes, those you spent your life loving and protecting are those that will be burdened with what was your responsibility to be prepared for as best you can. Excuse number 3, my parents passed away without needing long-term care, so I probably won't need any either. Although family history is always taken into consideration with our planning and has its place for certain genetic conditions, a person's lifespan is thought to be largely determined by the combined effects of genetics and environmental factors. Twin studies suggest genetics only account for approximately 20 to 30% of an individual's chance of surviving to age 85. In other words, you have significant control over your longevity by taking good care of yourself. Medical advancements are continuing to improve or to move forward, and what was not treatable and or caught early in our parents' time, such as a cancer diagnosis, very well may be treatable now or even more likely in the future. Remember how I mentioned in a previous video that my dad thought he'd never lived to age 65 since none of his family that had at that time had lived that long due to various cancers and heart conditions? Well, of course, since he was so adamant that this would be his fate, he's now 77 and needs help with instrumental acts of daily living. With that said, please be very cautious about assuming your future long-term care needs will have any relation to what your parents experienced, except for where genetic conditions apply, as again, your loved ones are the ones that pay the very high price for that assumption when it's wrong. Excuse number 4. My kids will take care of me if I ever need long-term care, just as I took care of my parents. Although family will likely do whatever they can to help, it will come at a much higher cost for the next generations than it perhaps ever was for prior ones. We have to remember many of our children are now burdened with unprecedented student loan debt, are scattered across the country away from you, and are often just making ends meet in two-income families who are putting off purchasing homes and starting families because of it. They just don't have much left to save for their own retirement, let alone add the expense of caring for a loved one on top of it. It's just natural that if they're caring for you, they're not spending that time furthering their own career, nor spending it with their own children or maintaining a healthy marriage. The cost financially is especially significant, with conservative estimates of lost income for a working caregiver running over $200,000 over his or her lifetime. And this doesn't even attempt to quantify the emotional and physical impact of caregiving, which is significant. If you have kids and you were thinking they'd be your caregivers one day, take the time to really think about where they're at now, where they'll likely be when you're most likely to need care in your mid-80s, and ask yourself if they'd truly be in a position to care for you without significant sacrifice, even if they offered. If you had the ability to spare them this burden, would you do so? We strive with our planning to evaluate the role of children in your caregiving plan, and whenever possible, we attempt to limit them to helping coordinate your care, not provide it, so they can remain in their precious roles as your sons and daughters. Excuse number 5. I'll just go on Medicaid if I need long-term care. It is wonderful that Medicaid is currently available for those that need it, and perhaps this might be inevitable for you depending on your situation. But I can't emphasize enough, it's not a plan, it's a last resort. The goals of long-term care planning are to offer choice of care whenever might be needed, to ensure sufficient funding is always available for both you and your spouse's care if ever needed, and most importantly, to help maintain precious family relationships. If your assets are spent down on your care and you end up on Medicaid, what's left for your spouse's retirement and long-term care plans? Will the kids now have to unexpectedly step in and help care for your spouse one day as a result? What's left for the legacy you wanted to leave your kids? The number of facilities offering Medicaid beds is decreasing all over, since the reimbursement is well under the actual cost of care, and they aren't always able to get foundation funding or private pay residents to subsidize the loss. It's common for areas to have very limited options for those that need facility care day one on Medicaid, and the closest one to you might be 30 to 60 miles away. Would your spouse or kids be able to visit you as often as they'd like to, and more importantly, that you'd want them to? I also know the facilities most of the clients I work with want to go to are private pay only, meaning they don't accept Medicaid at all. If you truly want Medicaid to be your chosen plan, or if it has to be based on your financial situation, please be sure to talk to an elder law attorney in your area, as they specialize in this planning and can help make the best of the situation for you and your family. So those are the top 5 excuses for not planning for long-term care, but certainly this is not a complete list. Did I address your reasons? If not, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to discuss them with you personally. Moving on to the next video, I'll be talking specifically about why you should plan for long-term care, or perhaps the effects of not planning might be more applicable. I'll see you there.